Hey, that's not Simba.
His name is Stitch,
Oh, great. He's loose.
and he's coming to our galaxy this summer. Disney's Lilo and Stitch.
That's right, that was actually a trailer for Lilo and Stitch, the 2002 animated classic from Walt Disney Feature Animation, and boy, is this movie still a classic. I mean, over 20 years later, it is still, I think, one of Disney's best, and it almost reinvigorated the 2D animation style as an art form for Disney animation. I mean, this movie is so pivotal to Disney's existence and their history. I mean, it is just so wonderful and so unique and so special, and the fact that this movie exists is kind of a miracle. And actually is the perfect blueprint. It is the key to unlocking the secret as to why Disney seems to be kind of struggling with their animation in recent years. Sure, they've had hits, but with Disney's Wish recently coming out to mixed critical acclaim and low audience reception, it seems that we have to unpack why Disney is not doing as well and why Disney is under such heavy criticism from the general public. And I think the answer lies within Lilo and Stitch. I'm going to explain all of that to you today, as well as share my thoughts on the movie, because I grew up on Lilo and Stitch. I was born in 2007, I'm 16 years old, so my brother and I watched this movie endlessly when we were younger, and we even watched the spin-off movies, the spin-off TV shows, the anime even. We were confused by that. So we were huge fans of Lilo and Stitch. It is part of my childhood. I rewatched it recently, and I was like, wow, there is so much here. So much great, awesome messages, and I mean, it is just a beautiful movie. So, hello, my name is Eli Hollingsworth, and I'm just here reminding people that teenagers can think a little deeply too. And today, we're thinking deeply about Lilo and Stitch. Now, in order to understand how Lilo and Stitch exists, why it is here, we first have to unpack how Lilo and Stitch became Lilo and Stitch. And their story starts in 1985, when director Chris Sanders, also the writer, producer, and voice of Stitch on Lilo and Stitch, came up with the idea for this children's book about a creature lost in the woods, finding his place amongst the other animals. This story, however, was a bit too long to condense into a children's book, so he abandoned the idea. Chris Sanders then was later picked up by Walt Disney Feature Animation, climbed the ranks there. He became a storyboard artist, a head storyboard artist actually. He was well renowned within the company. And then in 1997, as animators and select people from the Walt Disney Feature Animation Company were retreating to Michael Eisner CEO's farm in Vermont, the studio was at a bit of a turning point. They had immense success in the Disney Renaissance era with hits like The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. They also had Hercules and Pocahontas, which were moderate successes, but not at all what they were hoping for. They ramped up with The Lion King, and then kind of plateaued and even dropped with their next few. Disney just kept getting bigger and bigger, and as Chris Sanders, the director, recalls an interaction with Michael Eisner, the CEO, at a party one time where they were talking, and Michael Eisner likes hockey, but Chris Sanders doesn't really like hockey, so Michael Eisner said, I'm going to go back out and mingle with the crowd. So Michael Eisner goes back out, and in a few minutes he comes back in and tells Chris Sanders, I don't know anybody at this party. This thing is just getting too big. It's getting bigger and bigger. So the thought of the company was, let's make a movie that is, quote, this generation's Dumbo. And if you don't recall, Dumbo, the Walt Disney Company, was made basically on a shoestring budget. It was so cheap to make. There's like one deleted scene. They had no time or money to waste with it. They just had to get it out and do one select focused story. They wanted to emulate that with a movie, and they decided that Chris Sanders was the guy for the job. They said, we think the next one should be you. And Chris Sanders recalled that little monster in the forest that he tried to make a children's book for, and that was his pitch. Thomas Schumacher, creative executive at Disney, heard this pitch from Chris Sanders and decided that shouldn't be in a forest, but yet with humans. He said animals don't really know what aliens are. It's kind of putting a hat on a hat, even when it's in a forest, so it's not relatable to the human audience that's going to be watching. He then suggested that it be set in Hawaii, because he always wanted to visit there, and he had a grandma who lived there. Chris Sanders had a picture of Hawaii on his wall, and he looked at it and thought, that would be an interesting place to have the story. He picked out the names Lilo, Lane, and Nani from that picture and decided that those sound like names, so they would be included in the movie. He then brought on Dean DeBlois, who was going to be a co-director of the movie, and they were both the driving creative forces behind Lilo and Stitch. From there, they decided they had to go visit Hawaii, learn a lot about the culture, and there's a lot more involved in the story. But the main important factor into how Lilo and Stitch became a classic, what I think is the main pivotal part, was that it was produced in the newly formed Disney's Florida studio, not in-house in California where all the Disney executives reside and where they would have to have screenings for the big executives, the people in the suits and ties who, if you've been keeping up with my channel, I've often discussed how the people in suits and ties, the business people behind movies, should really have no part in it at all. Chris Sanders had been scarred from the infamous screening room for the big executives multiple times where he had screened a movie for Michael Eisner or other CEOs or CCOs in the Disney company, and they just didn't get it, and their notes made the movie worse. Not to dog on anyone, of course, but I just don't think business people have a part in making something creative, and that's a piece of art like a movie. Obviously, they're very helpful for distribution and promotion and all that stuff and how to make it and how to manage the money because movies do cost a lot of money, but from a creative side, I don't think they should have that big of a say in the actual story. So here is why Lilo and Stitch was so awesome, and later we're going to talk about how it relates to Disney now. Michael Eisner, the CEO of the Walt Disney Feature Animation, did not see Lilo and Stitch until it was almost finished, and really all that was left was to add some sound effects. He didn't see it till it was almost done. And Lilo and Stitch is one of Disney's edgiest. Stitch in the marketing was labeled as this, with the poster reading, "There's one in every family." They knew that this was their theme for the movie. Really is a miracle that this movie was made completely in the Florida studio, off the grid, away from the main in-house studio of Disney where all of the operations take place. With all the studying of Hawaiian culture and the bringing on of Alan Silvestri, famous composer, to do the music, the pieces were falling into place for Lilo and Stitch to become an instant classic. The creators, Chris Sanders, Dean DeBlois, and all others involved knew that they were making a risky project, and it's clear to see on the final screen. That was a risk. I mean, the merging of the Galactic Trade Federation, Hawaiian culture, family, and Elvis, that just seems so random, and yet it works so well, because there was one clear message that the movie was intending to tell that might even be a tad bit understated, about a message of belonging and family, and it is just so powerful. Ohana, this theme that Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois learned from a Hawaiian native and decided was a huge important factor to incorporate into the movie's foundation. This message of belonging and how family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten is such a powerful message executed in such a creative and interesting way. Chris Sanders was the idea crazy man who would come up with, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then Dean DeBlois would kind of sit down and find the connective tissue, story-wise, that brought them all together. This movie has no right being as amazing as it is, but this kind of stuff is the exact stuff that I love to see in movie making. And this is the exact kind of thing that blossoms in the medium of animation. Another huge risk that was taken with Lilo and Stitch was the choice to make the backgrounds completely watercolor painted, a method that Disney Animation hadn't used for decades. In fact, no one at the studio even knew how to do it. They had to relearn how to watercolor paint backgrounds. They didn't know what paper or materials to use, so one of the veterans had to coach them, and they had to spend months relearning how to watercolor paint backgrounds. But it even more fits with the risky theme of this movie and how it was kind of a rebellion charge against the Walt Disney Company at the time, who had been scared of the fact that Pixar was creating such huge hits with CG animation that they wanted to pivot more towards following the trend. But as cinema history shows, movies are so much more impactful when they are proactive and not reactive. And Disney was trying to be reactive. And in the modern day, we're going to get into this a little bit, I think Disney is being extremely reactive. But Lilo and Stitch is the perfect example of the hyperactive proactiveness that caused it to be such a phenomenal movie. Even the art style itself is different from traditional Disney animation. It's a different story entirely. I mean, this doesn't even seem on paper like it would be a Disney animated movie. They decided to incorporate Chris Sanders' animation style, who he didn't even know he had one before someone wrote a book about how to copy his animation style for the other artist, and it gives it the distinct flair, which is how animation is supposed to be. It's a medium where you can do all kinds of crazy things, experiment, try your own style, make your mark, and make something memorable that lasts forever. And Lilo and Stitch, yet again, is the perfect example of that. I mean, this movie is so genius. And looking back on it now, it's easy to see why it was a huge part of my childhood. The creators knew that they were making something special, and nobody was going to get in their way. This is unprecedented in the Disney Animation Company at the time, and it's something that I think Disney has forgotten in recent years. It was a perfect storm, lightning in a bottle. There was nothing like it before Lilo and Stitch came out, and there's been nothing like it since. Hey, real quick, I just want to ask you, if you don't want to subscribe, I'm not going to ask you to. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe. But I will say, if you don't want to subscribe, just at least check out one other video by me. You can check out why Disney live-action remakes have to end. I made a video about that. That's a pretty cool video. If you like this, you'll probably like that too. Go ahead and check that out. I'll greatly appreciate it. Just one other video. I promise if you like it, then I would consider subscribing if I were you, because I think you'll like some other videos that I have. Just stick around, hang out. It's cool. Let's chill. Hey, let's get back to the video, though. So Lilo and Stitch, I keep talking about how this movie is so special. Sorry, I keep hitting my pop filter. So Lilo and Stitch, I keep talking about how it's such an instant classic. You've probably seen the movie already if you're clicking on this video and you saw the title and thumbnail, but you don't know why I think it's so good, or why it is such a classic. We talked about the behind-the-scenes reasons. Now let's talk about the story reasons, the cinema reasons. That's purely because it has one central goal in mind. One message, one story to tell. It is one reason of existing, and its sole intention is setting up to accomplish that reason for existing. Now, that might be a very vague way to say things, and it may not sound like it makes much sense, but the message that's trying to convey is a message of belonging, a broken family. Ohana means family, you know, that message is obviously repeated, but if you go through the story, you see how Stitch is really a really interesting character and a really cool story device, because, like I said before, the Lilo and Stitch movie is meant to be the Dumbo of this generation. The movie is supposed to be a smaller, low-budget, more hands-on experience for the filmmakers, for the audience. And Stitch was really close to Dumbo in the original drafts of the story, without even having any speaking roles to begin with, but they realized that Stitch had to say something. Stitch had to talk, because Stitch has to repeat the main message that he learns, which is Ohana means family, and well, I'll just let them say it.
Family means
nobody gets left behind.
Or
forgotten.
This idea that Stitch is just built to destroy. And when he comes to Earth and meets Lilo, that is just, the genius of this story is so awesome. The contrast between Stitch, this super weapon who was designed to destroy and has the brain of a supercomputer, he can lift things
3,000 times his size.
and then meeting this little girl, a part of this broken family. Lilo and Nani are just trying to make do. They've lost their parents. Nani is working, trying to find a job. The social worker, Cobra Bubbles, enters the equation, who is also a phenomenal character. Every character is just perfection. My favorite quote from Cobra Bubbles is,
"Thus far you have been adrift in the sheltered harbor of my patience."
such a funny line. I mean, the writing in this movie is witty, it is sharp, it's funny, and it has bite. Stitch jokes aside. And the reason it has that is because there were no executives at the top fiddling with it, sanding it down, making it more accessible to the public. There's really a strong bite to the script. There's a strong edge to it. There's a sharpness that penetrates your heart and it gets right to your core. It's funny, it's smart, it's heartfelt, and the song Aloha Oi is beautiful. It's a classic Hawaiian song, and the fact that the creators were smart enough to bring on real Hawaiian people for the voices of Nani, David, and they were able to influence the actual story. They added Hawaiian slang. They added languages and words and phrases from the Hawaiian language that the creators had no idea about, and stuff that you would only know if you're local to Hawaii. And this culture about family, about belonging, about acceptance, about connections is really what Stitch finds is beautiful about humans on Earth. Stitch's purpose in life is to destroy, and when he meets this little girl, Lilo, that purpose leaves him. He stops destroying. He tries to find something else beyond that. Jumbo says,
626 was designed to be a monster, but now he has nothing to destroy. You see, I never gave him a greater purpose.
So Stitch is trying to find a purpose beyond destroying. He can't find a purpose beyond what he was built to, and throughout the course of the movie, he goes against his programming and finds a greater purpose, about love, about family, something that he was taught through connecting with Lilo and Nani and David. And this sort of idea of found family, which is very present in Hawaiian culture as well, is just perfect. It's beautiful. It's awesome. It tugs at your heartstrings. I was tearing up multiple times watching this movie. I was like, wow, this is so profound. Way more so than I remember it being. And that's the beauty of it as well, being a Disney animated classic. These Disney animated classics, they grow up with you. When I was a kid, it's fun to see Stitch go around and destroy things, and it's funny, and it's, you know, you laugh at it. And as I get older, I can see the deeper and deeper messages. And it goes deeper and deeper. And it gets better and better as I get older. You notice what that joke means, or what that line is referring to, or how this emotion is supposed to feel. And that's the beauty of Lilo and Stitch as he goes on this journey of self-discovery, of finding his purpose. And the love that binds Lilo and Stitch and Nani and Jumbo and Pleakley at the end of the movie, to where this is half alien, half human. It's a jumbled mess of a family. But it is built on love, true love. Like, it's not a traditional Disney story, but it kind of is, because it is built on this idea of true love. Not in the same sense as a romantic way, but in a real, authentic, family way. It really is an action-adventure sci-fi movie, if you think about it. I mean, there's lots of action scenes, lots of great action scenes, by the way. There's people blasting each other, there's big spaceships, there's a spaceship battle at the end for the third act of the movie, there's aliens. It really is a science fiction action-adventure blockbuster. So it goes crazy, it goes wacky. Again, it is very weird. The inclusion of Elvis is so funny to me, and me being a huge Elvis fan, I think I am a huge Elvis fan because this movie really introduced me to Elvis. Chris Sanders is a huge fan of Elvis as well, and when they were starting to make the movie, it is reported that that was always something he talked about, was including an Elvis soundtrack in the movie. And Elvis visits Hawaii, he's a part of Hawaiian culture, but the glue that holds it all together is its message about Lilo and Stitch finding his ohana, his family.
Ohana means family. Family means nobody
gets left behind.
or forgotten. Yeah.
He finds that ugly duckling book saying, "I'm lost." And the ugly duckling is lost until his family comes back and sees him and saves him. And Stitch doesn't have that. He doesn't have that family to go back to.
Waiting.
For what?
Family.
You don't have one.
There's one scene in Lilo and Stitch that really hit me in the heart, is when Stitch is leaving Lilo. And it's really profound because Lilo says to Stitch,
What happened to yours? I hear you cry at night. Do you dream about them? I know that's why you wreck things and push me.
and the truth is, Stitch isn't thinking about those people because Stitch doesn't have those people. He realizes that. And he thinks that all he does is destroy and wreck things, make things worse. So he decides it's better if he leaves. I can talk all day about every scene in this movie when Stitch sees Lilo and Nani in the hammock. And he sees her saying goodbye to Lilo and her being so sad that she has to say goodbye to Lilo, who she's been trying so hard to keep. And this movie has some really sad moments. Like, it's really sad for a Disney movie how Nani lost her parents. She's trying to take care of Lilo, but Lilo is being taken away by a social worker because in reality, Nani is probably not suitable to have Lilo and to be a suitable parent for her, especially not with the threat of Stitch being there, making things so much worse and so much more complicated. So she's going to have to say goodbye to her sister, who is really the only family she has left as of we know of. Like, it is so sad. But it's so real. It's really a realist Disney movie with the inclusion of Cobra Bubbles, the social worker. Like, it feels grounded in reality. Despite the fact that there is a galactic trade federation with talking anthropomorphic aliens who are attacking Earth, and there are big explosions and giant spaceships. It is crazy, but it is so real at the same time. Its message is full of heart and humanity. So much more so than tons of other live-action movies that are about people in the real world. It is so genius. Every bit of this movie is genius. As Stitch sees Nani and Lilo in the hammock, and he sees the true love that is emanating from both of them. How Stitch gets changed by the essence of true love from being a destroyer and a wrecker to someone who is part of this broken, misshapen family. The character arc that Stitch, our main character, goes on, and Lilo is our main character too, but our main character arc for Stitch is such a profound one to where he completely does a 180 in his entire character and his entire core beliefs to become someone who is much different and has much different values than where he started at the beginning of the movie, because he didn't know what his purpose was. But he saw what Lilo and Nani had found to where they had nothing but each other. And they were still happily making it work. He thought that there was maybe something to that. As much as Jumba tried to deter him,
Maybe I could.
You're built to destroy. You can never belong.
Stitch still found his purpose, his ohana. And that leads us to our final point. Why is Lilo and Stitch the perfect blueprint for what is happening to Disney in the modern day? Well, let me tell you. Lilo and Stitch exists because of the truest expression of free will and free artistic creativity. The storytellers behind this movie had no suppression, were not being controlled by the people in the suits and ties, the higher-ups, the business people. breathing down their necks and making those notes that they make that change the movie, change the story to make it cheaper or easier in some way, sanding down the edges that Michael Eisner tended to frequently do with all of these movies in this era. Lilo and Stitch was made completely off the grid. In the filmmaker's words, it was like a plane being built in a secret hangar off the grid. It was totally original. It was totally free from the Disney overlords in the suits and ties at the Walt Disney Company. And now Disney is being heavily criticized for being, quote-unquote, formulaic or generic or, it seems that Disney has sanded down the edges yet again in the modern age with a movie like Disney's Wish, which has had mixed receptions from critics and not very high reviews from audiences. I'll tell you the reason for this. Disney, with Disney's Wish, was being reactive, not proactive. What Disney was trying to do with Disney's Wish was harp on the audience's nostalgia. They were saying, hey, look at this, you remember that? Or, hey, you remember this? This is from that other movie. They even did this with the marketing. They called it Disney's Celebration of 100 Years, but all they were really trying to do was play on classic tropes that they've done before. Disney was being reactive to the animation style itself. They tried to go for a storybook-esque look, but it's been criticized for being flat and boring, which I totally agree. Why does it look flat and boring? Because Disney is being reactive yet again. From the classic hits of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, I've talked about Across the Spider-Verse on this channel, their animation is new, it's fresh. Sony Animation reinvented how we view animated movies as an art form with animating on twos, having hand-drawn animation built in, and having all these cool artistic things that make it stand out and unique. This made a wave of movies with the quote-unquote Spider-Verse animation, like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mitchells vs. the Machines. They all call it the Spider-Verse animation style. And really what the term Spider-Verse animation style means is just creators and animators who are willing to push the medium to make it more creative and artistic and express themselves in a way that nobody else is doing. Disney, on the other hand, saw this and got the wrong idea. They said, hey, we need to feature 2D animation. A Disney feature animated film hasn't had 2D animation since Winnie the Pooh 2011, so hey, I do respect that. Instead of doing their animation in a way that fit their story and expressed it in a new creative artistic way that made an impact on an audience, instead it just seemed like they were copying what other people have done better before. It seemed like Disney was just trying to react to the wave of success that recent animated movies have had by expressing themselves in a new and unique way. Disney trying to copy that, being reactive, resulted in Disney's Wish, which is being viewed as bland and boring. Now listen, I'm all for Disney experimenting, trying new things. We all clamor for Disney to go back to making original movies instead of their live-action remakes. And then it seems that when they make original stuff, we harp on it. But there is a standard that has been set by the Disney company. A standard that was upheld and expanded with Lilo and Stitch, and that is the pushing of the medium, the experimentation, the risks being taken. Disney's Wish is safe. There are no risks being taken there. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing that we haven't seen from a Disney animation before. In fact, that's the main criticism, is that it is trying to pull too much from what Disney has done before. It's not expanding Disney's status quo. It's not adding in new techniques or things that help the Disney brand in any way. It's just trying to recreate stuff that's already been created. And that, right there, is when Disney has a pitfall into a lack of creativity. I think this is happening because the people in the suits and ties are running the show. Instead of the animators and the creators getting notes from the studio, it seems that the studio is having more control than the storytellers. Now, I don't work at Disney, and I'm not trying to harp on anyone or anything or make any observations or assumptions that aren't true, but what it seems like is Disney is churning out these formulaic, processed movies with the intent of, on paper, calculating the best way to generate the most income, without first and foremost trying to tell a compelling story. They just announced that they're making Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 at the same time. They're making sequels now. They're going back to what they do best. They're churning out these live-action remakes, going back to what they did before. Just regurgitating stuff that's already been gurgitated. If Disney happens to be watching this, let me ask Disney the same question that was asked for Lilo and Stitch to come into existence. What is this generation's Dumbo? Now, the question in and of itself might seem like it's just trying to harp on what came before, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's saying, let's take the principles of Dumbo, which is, let's tell a new, creative, fresh, interesting story that nobody's done before. Let's go there. Let's be weird. Let's be wacky. Let's be creative. Let's be risky. And applying it to an entire new generation so we can have our minds opened and explore something that we've never seen before and enter a world that takes us away to a magical place. And when there is a true, fresh, interesting answer to that question, a movie that has heart, that is expanding the status quo, that is changing Disney animation and furthering it in a way that nobody else has done before, we find this generation's Dumbo, this generation's Lilo and Stitch per se, I think you'll find that Disney animation is back in business. So there you go. There's how Lilo and Stitch changed animation forever and how it became a staple in American culture, in my childhood, and in many other people's lives, and how it really is the perfect example of why Disney animation seems to be a little bit on the downhill slope as of late, and how Disney could maybe fix themselves if they have the heart to take the risks, which I don't think they do, but I would encourage Disney to try. There you go. I hope I proved to you that teenagers can think a little deeply too today. Again, if you want to check out my video, Why Disney Live Action Remakes Should End, I would highly recommend you check out that video, or at least just one other video that I've made. And if you don't want to go through the trouble of watching a whole other video, then just subscribe. And turn on notifications so you can be notified whenever I come out with my next banger of a video, for your entertainment pleasure. Let me know down below in the comments if you're eating lunch while watching this video, but also your thoughts on this whole thing and the Disney live action remakes, or the Disney brand in general, or Lilo and Stitch. How much do you love Lilo and Stitch? Be sure to let me know down below in the comments. And if you want to see another video by me, just click right here on my face, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.